So if you saw, I made a video earlier talking about basically I created this whole system to properly evaluate how much a specific position group matters. And it was universally agreed upon to be a great success. No one had any complaints with it. It was perfect. And honestly, I think it is pretty accurate, but maybe has some flaws. And the one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to go back and I wanted to use that to sort of see what else can we learn from that data. And the first thing that jumped out is let's just plug it into what happened last year and see what was every team's expected win total. Which team improved and which teams did worse, you know? And so that's what I decided to do. And this is the complete list of that. Okay, so this is all 32 teams, just so you know what you're looking at. On the first column, that's just, the team, where they ranked and what their record was. The middle column, that's how much expected wins they had. So, for example, if you want to look at number 16, we'll say the Bengals went 4-11 because they had a tie. They were expected to have 4.49 wins. So they finished almost exactly what you would expect. They only had an improvement of 0.01 wins over expected. So they were one of the more right on teams. In fact, a lot of these teams ended up being pretty accurate. Half of the teams ended up within one game of their expected win total, and 2/3 of these teams ended up within 2 games. So it was 21 teams that ended up within 2 games. So to me, I was really impressed with that. I was really pleasantly surprised. I had maybe a little bit of worries. Is this really right? But it seems like most of these ended up correct. And again, when you factor in, I'm not factoring in luck, which obviously is a big part of the game, and I'm not factoring in coaching, which is maybe equally as big. It makes sense that there's going to be some variance right here. And most of the ones where there is swings, there is some explanations, although I'll talk about the more extreme ones in a second, because I'm sure a couple have already caught your eye and you're saying, what in the world? How is that possible? We'll get into that in a second. A team like Tampa Bay, for example, I think that that makes sense. They were expected to be a 13-win team. They only won 11 games, but they won the Super Bowl. So that does kind of make some sense. So now let's go over here. These are the 6 really standout teams that had a big jump one way or the other. So the Dolphins and Ravens were the 2 teams that had more wins than their expected win total, whereas the Vikings, Texans, 49ers, and Falcons all had significantly more losses than you would have expected from their expected win total. So what happened here? Is it a flaw in the system, or do I think that maybe there's something interesting? And I think both. There is one flaw. We'll start off with that one, the Baltimore Ravens. The thing that jumped out to me was I did not include running ability in a quarterback's play. I only included them throwing the football. That was just a complete oversight that I made in this. So I think that the actual formula itself will be fine, but just when evaluating it, I have to include running ability. So, for example, when I just did this last year list, I didn't include Lamar Jackson's running ability. There's probably a couple games added on there, at least one, probably 2 games added on just from that. So that's a huge difference. And I would also say, maybe there's some other things that could factor in. Because, they had a great point differential. They actually had a negative record in 1-score games. So I don't think they were unlucky necessarily. So I don't think that's the case. What I do think is that part of it is Lamar Jackson's running. He kind of breaks the game a little bit, could make things easier for wide receivers. So maybe that's just an external factor. But again, he's such a unicorn. It's hard to really, he's kind of on his own island there. And I also think they were well coached. So, good coaching. I think my hypothesis is it can add probably a win to 2 wins. So maybe even if you say 2 wins there, you have about a 1.5 with Lamar. I also think that I use Pro Football Focus's grades for this. So I think their secondary was a little bit better than Pro Football Focus gave it credit for. So I think there were some points added there. So that's why I think that had a big jump. So that one, I would say the biggest thing was just I got to include a quarterback's running ability, which I will do next time. We'll stay with the top now, and we'll talk about Miami for a second, because that's just a very fascinating thing that is a bit surprising, I would say. I do think that there was an element of luck in some of their games. I do think that. I also think they were very well coached. So it doesn't surprise me that they ended up with more wins. But the shocking thing is the 4.6, which is significantly higher than any other team. And again, I think Baltimore was kind of a mistake with the Lamar thing. So they might be over a win higher than the actual next biggest swing period. It doesn't seem like they were particularly too lucky. I mean, they went 3-3 in their one-score games, so that, again, that's mediocre. That's kind of what you'd expect with those close games. They had a point differential of 66, so it was still positive. So again, the fact that they were considered just a 5.5 win team and they won 10 games, uh, it's confusing to me. And I do think part of it is Brian Flores, but that's one that maybe there is a flaw here because I don't know exactly why that's the case. The biggest reason I think it's the case is that Pro Football Focus actually had them as not the best coverage team. They only gave them 1.5 wins using my chart. Their grade meant that they only got 1.5. I think they probably could have gotten an extra win and a half just from that. So that brings them up to 7, which makes things a little bit easier, although still not great. But maybe there's some other stuff. Their quarterback play, they were in the second worst category. Maybe you feel like Fitzpatrick put them up to mediocre, which that would have added another win there. So maybe that is the difference. And then Flores takes care of the rest. I could see that. So it's interesting. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but maybe if you guys have some suggestions, that's probably the one I have the most difficult time explaining. Because we go down to the Vikings now. The Vikings were actually considered, with their talent, a 10.42 win team. They ended up not winning that many. They won 7 games. So not a huge jump, but a significant one. But I think part of it is, for one thing, they ended up with a minus 40 point differential, which that seems like, okay, that kind of checks out for a 7-9 team. 6-4. So it's not like they were particularly unlucky there. So again, the luck factor isn't a huge thing there. I really think what it comes down to is they have a run heavy offense. And that kind of means that their receivers, which that's where a lot of points come into play, a lot of wins come into play, they don't get to use them as much. So despite their talented receivers, they ended up not being as valuable in that offense. And I think that if they threw the ball more, I think that they would probably win some more games. I think that's probably the biggest reason why they didn't perform as well as their talent level would indicate. And if they can fix that, they might be a lot better. For number 30, the Texans, they were considered a 7.5 win team. They end up only winning 4 games. And this team was absolutely unlucky. Their point differential was minus 80, which is usually a little bit worse than like a 6-win team. So just point differential alone, it gets a lot closer. They also were 2-7 in one-score games. So they were unlucky and they were poorly coached. So, they fired their coach 4 games into the season. So clearly poor coaching and some unluckiness as well. That totally checks out to me that they would fall that far. And the 49ers are kind of another one where I think it's mostly luck. Obviously, I like Kyle Shanahan. Most people do. I think he's a good coach. I don't blame coaching for this. I think it is largely luck because, they had a minus 14 point differential, which is, okay, right around, like an 8-win team. They end up, they had a projection of a 9.79 win team, only win 6. So that could be the difference there. They were 2-3 in one-score games. So little unlucky, maybe 1 or 2 of those swing the other way. It becomes a lot closer as well. And I think the other factor is Pro Football Focus rated them as a top 5 wide receiver / tight end group and a top 5 coverage group last year. Maybe those weren't particularly true. I think probably, you could argue that one or two of those should have been docked down. If I made the list, I probably would have done that, which would have made it a lot closer. So again, when I'm going to do this system for my predictions, it'll be my own rankings, which hopefully will be better. But I wanted to plug in Pro Football Focus's just to have a baseline for this. And again, for Atlanta, it's kind of a similar thing. They were absolutely unlucky. I mean, how many games did they lose that, we thought for sure they were going to win and they just blew the lead at the end? There was some poor coaching here and they ended up with just a negative 18 point differential. So again, their talent was a lot better than 4, and I wrote 4-14 because I'm stupid. It was 4-12. That was what it was supposed to be. So that checks out for me. That seems about right. So I do kind of agree that, yeah, they're probably mediocre last year, not horrible. Their offense was really good and their defense had its moments as well, but this is mostly their offense that's making that work. So I think that there's some, maybe a couple flaws here and there, but as a whole, a lot of this makes sense. And there's some interesting stuff to look at here. We can go back to the list of all 32 one more time. I'm going to try to remember to just tweet out this list, all these lists so you guys can, see it there. Check out my Twitter. Link is in the description. You can check that out if you want to go over it a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, you go through the list, things seemingly make a good amount of sense. I mean, like a team like the Seahawks, okay, They overperformed a little. That seems about right. Pittsburgh Steelers, again, overperformed a little. That feels about right. It's also interesting to me that you look at like number 15, the Jets, number 16, the Bengals. I was interested how some of these poorer teams would do, like would the system work? It clearly does. I mean, the Jets almost nailed it. Bengals almost nailed it. And even like a team like number 17, the Cleveland Browns, a lot of people were saying that, oh, they got lucky to be here. Well, actually, no, they were pretty close to the middle in terms of points expected. So I think I've basically learned two things with doing this little segment right here. The first thing is really that I think that the system I've created really works. And I think that I am right about this. This really kind of helps reassure me that I was right, because a lot of this ended up being really accurate. And you look at any other sort of statistic, it's not going to get you as close to the wins and losses as this system does. So I don't know that for a fact because I haven't gone over every single system, but I did check out some, and it seems like this is a lot better. So that's pretty promising, I think, and definitely makes me feel pretty good about that. And I think the other thing I've learned was just sort of these smaller things, like, oh, okay, Atlanta, yeah, they might be better next year because they were really unlucky last year. So something like that is something that I think is interesting. And same thing with like maybe a San Francisco. They perhaps got unlucky last year, and maybe like for a team like Minnesota, hey, Minnesota, what they really need to do is just, stop running the ball so much. You can learn stuff like that. You can learn Tampa Bay was actually unlucky in the regular season, which again makes sense. They did go on to win the Super Bowl. They had the second highest point expectancy in terms of this, actually, or a third highest, actually. The Bills were actually third, the Bills were second, which is kind of interesting as well. So Bills, very good heading in the next year. And again, how well does this work one game to one game? I don't know. But over the course of a season, it seems to check out pretty well. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.